So, um, back again to more senseless rambling. I wanted to talk about something this time around that a friend asked me. Um, and that, it's, as always, deeply important and a key part of relations. Um, how should you deal with lust? How should you, let's say you're addicted to, um, I don't know, porn, cigarettes, whatever. Anything that's um, bad for you, basically. Let's say you're addicted to those things, but let's take the example of pornography, right? It inevitably takes a deep toll on your relationships. You know, sort of grass is green statements again. Um, but I'm sure everybody that has a brain can figure out that something that is of the nature of pornography would inevitably um, have consequences on um, relations with people, and in particular women, because the nature of pornography, or men. I don't care. I don't judge. Um, but of any sort. Um, and you know, I'm not a priest. I'm not a genius. I'm not a wise old man. Um, I don't know anything, right? But um, I do read sometimes. And I do also have eyes to spy reality, right? I understand, and I can observe it, and what I see is um, men having a very, very pitched battle with lust and struggling to keep it under control. Um, to the extent that, like I said, it starts taking inevitable and sometimes irreparable damages on personal relationships. Uh, but how should you control it, right? And I feel like this is something that is it's a conversation that every man should have with himself, not necessarily with another person, because not everybody has um, the possibility to do that with another person. But it's something that's worth talking about, and um, some people would argue, oh, how am I to not be um, lured and to be um, basically falling time and time again into pornography and into desire and lust when these women dress in these ways, um, and when so much of modern society has made um, the the object of my obsession so available and um, so easy to obtain. Um, I say that's fucking dumb, right? I know, hot take. But how can you judge your own errors to be errors of somebody else, right? Because if you're addicted to pornography and you say, "Oh, it's not my fault. It's fault that of these women that dress in this way, and it makes me aroused," and why? And I understand that it doesn't feel good to take responsibility, right, for something that is effectively a an addiction. It doesn't. It never feels good, right? Especially not not because of the nature of pornography. Um, but you can't pass blame onto others. It is your choice. It is something that was born solely out of your desire. To say that it's somebody else's fault is moronic at best, psychotic at worst. And how should you deal with this, knowing that it's ultimately up to you? How should you deal with lust and being able um, to keep it under control? it is exactly that, right? You need to realize that it is under your control and solely under your control. Um, and I would encourage you um, to go read about Saint Mary of Egypt, right? Um, a prostitute for many years, but she ended up repenting and ultimately became a saint. And I think she presents a good example on how to deal with lust. But I think it's also important to talk about how big of a role lust has in our modern day society, in our modern relations. Um, and I feel like we've made it common. Common in the sense that it's normalized. Don't get me wrong, right? Sexual relations, that's one thing. Lust and obsession for the flesh, that's another, right? I think it's important to part the seas and to draw the lines and to understand the difference of both concepts. They're not the same thing, right? I'm not talking about sexual relations. I'm talking about lust. People who let their lives be utterly consumed by desire and to the point where it just starts taking a toll on reality, on their reality. They start looking at people and they start looking to places and start thinking things. And I'm talking about that sort of behavior. I'm not talking about sexual relations because that's an intrinsic, inexorable part of humanity. Like we can't get rid of that ever, and it's good that it exists, right? Because it constitutes an expression of our values and of our humanity, and that's perfectly okay. I'm talking about people that take um, the fact that desire is so easy to fulfill nowadays, and they run with that fact, right? And especially talking about pornography because it's by far the easiest desire to to fulfill nowadays. Um, you know, like just the fact that um, the internet came about, and I think the advent of the internet is to blame for a lot of things, both positive and negative. But when it comes to this specific topic, it is the deal breaker, right? It is it constitutes basically the apotheosis of um, the our drive to fulfill our desires, to make it as easy as possible to fulfill our desires. Because I think it's maybe a bit silly to compare. Um, but you go back 50 years and people thought showing off your ankles was scandalous, right? And nowadays, so much has become normalized. I'm not saying this is bad, right? I'm saying it's normal. Especially because we don't live in the 50s anymore, which Jesus fucking Christ, that was a fucking mess. Um, but fulfilling your obsession, your desires, your lust, um, it's the easiest thing nowadays, right? All it takes is a Google search. Um, and it's this enabling that's made it so easy for these things to take control of our lives. And that's what you can't let them do, right? You can't let these things take control of your life. You can't let them dictate how you think and how you see and the ways you act, right? Because as soon as they start taking control of that, you start. I mean, it's again silly to compare, but you start acting like an animal in the most literal sense possible. Like, if you let lust control you, what difference is there between you and the monkey, right? Because all the monkey knows, as far as we know, is to live, fucking die. That's what it knows to do, and that's his goal. And if you let lust take your life, it gets you very close to that to that mentality, right? It's live, fulfill pleasure, and die. That's your immediate life. It's fulfilling pleasure. You get home, that's what you think about. And you're out on the street, that's what you think about. That can happen, right? And I feel like it's important to fix this problem because it is an enormous part of society nowadays, of relations nowadays. You go online and the normalization of lust, I personally find it sickening, right? The way people talk about body counts and fucking inordinate amounts of people with the greatest of ease, it sickens me, right? And I find it deeply disturbing because we're taking something that meant so much, right? We took carnal relations that were defined once as the epitome of love, the greatest expression of love in a consensual way, of course. I'm not talking about history and wars, because that puts a that puts a dent on all that. But I think we've taken it and transformed and molded it into something so utterly meaningless. It was once the greatest expression of love, and now, I mean, if you go on TikTok, Instagram, whatever, whatever you use, um, it is shockingly easy to come across people talking about body counts uh, and fucking stupid amounts of people. And I think also a good example of this commodification of the normalization of sex and of sexual relations. I think a big part of big example to talk about is the whole romance book sort of side of Instagram and TikTok, right? We are turning into fucking psychopaths, right? Um, when it comes to that sort of thing, and we're normalizing such weird behavior, and we're taking um, carnal relations, and we're turning it almost into uh, our plaything. And it's deeply disturbing, right? Because it's something that should be um, a moment of relation, of connection, right? I think the ultimate expression of all this is that we are forgetting where we come from, right? We are forgetting that the future has repercussions, and we are forgetting that um, Adam was made and Eve was made for him, not only for him but of him, right? One for the other in equal measure, held in matrimony. We forget that, right? And their relation was not in the slightest um, easy, right? It wasn't in the slightest light and devoid of commitment. It was the definition of commitment, right? One made for the other. One dust of the earth, and the other a rib of the dust of the earth. And you can't find that commitment nowadays, right? You can go online, look for it. Sure, you'll find amazing people out there that really have their head screwed all the way in, and that can love somebody, and that you know can look at the way things are nowadays and say, hey, no, I think this is bullshit. This is completely fucking insane. Um, you can find those people, but it is shockingly easy to find people who are so consumed by lack of commitment that they don't stop to think if it's normal, if it's right, if it is what they should be doing. And again, I think this is something that can be traced to a lack of self critique, right? A lack of introspection that I talked about before. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about lust because I feel like it's the maybe one of the biggest parts of modern dating, and it's maybe the part that we put the most emphasis into. Um, and I feel like it's important, as always. This channel is only about talking about important things in um, the most um, basically the weirdest way I could possibly ever think of. I don't think it differs much from just hearing a homeless man sharing wisdom while he's heavily drunk under an underpass. It doesn't differ much, um, in quality and in uh, just the vibe. But I feel like it's important to talk about some things, and that's what I want to do. Just share and um, keep on casting ideas to the wind. But yeah, I'll leave it here. I am shocked that I haven't gotten a single fish yet. Um, but I'll be here. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about it. So um, I'll finish here. And yeah, goodbye.